Instead of saying, I am here and extremely formidable, you could say, I'm not here at all. That, of course, is a straightforward lie, but there's a bird in these Brazilian forests that tells the most convincing of lies.
Finding it is not easy. Indeed, I'm quite sure I've walked past one many times without knowing it. But this time, we're lucky. It's sitting on the tree trunk. It's a potu, a kind of nightjar. It hunts for insects at night, so, like any other night worker, it needs to rest during the day, and it relies on the visual match between its feathers and the tree trunk to protect it from disturbance. The only thing that could give it away are its beak and its eyes. Now I'm getting quite close, so it decides to improve its disguise even further, and it does that by changing its posture and closing those giveaway eyes. Now it's no more than the stump of a broken branch.
Episode.
The Nabs. It's like Nab Seb. Nab Seabass.
What's that?
Vlad Nab.
The Vlad Nab Seabass.
What's Nat? Is
Like-
that Gossip Girl?
What?
No, what's Nat? What are you saying?
I'm saying Vladimir Nabokov Sebastian Knight.
Vlad Nab
Sebastian
Seabass.
Stan.
Vlad Nab
Oh.
Seabass.
I thought you were saying it was like that was like a known cultural reference.
Oh, why was your first?
Nab-
Why was your first guess Gossip Girl?
Oh, because I was thinking of Chuck Bass.
Oh, okay. All right,
Well, that's
fair enough.
funny because I was thinking of Gossip Girl because I was thinking of Sebastian Stan, who plays the Winter Soldier, because there's a part at the end of this book where he has a glove on his hand, and I was like, that's like the Winter Soldier. So that was pretty interesting.
Is he in Gossip Girl?
Yeah,
Oh, I
that's where he
didn't
got
know.
his start.
Oh.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Knight, in a dream that V has a black and a white glove on, one of which is filled with
Exactly.
tiny hands,
Yes.
which was maybe the grossest thing that this book had in it.
I was thinking of Gossip Girl because I want to smell Blake Lively's shoes.
Ah,
So-
yes.
Oh.
Right.
Welcome to Spine Crackers, everybody. Hi.
Wait, are we
The
actually
real
recording?
Blake Lively of Sebastian Knight.
That's right. Yeah, we're here. We're recording, baby.
Oh, wow.
We're ready.
We're
We've
here.
been
We're
recording.
live.
I didn't see.
And-
I don't see the record, but okay, never mind.
It's not okay.
Yeah, okay.
Come on, you got this.
Yep. Yeah, I got it.
We're so close to not doing this anymore. And by
what?
not, I mean the banter of not knowing.
I promise you, dear listener, that this is only like 20% performative.
Yeah, we're not like doing.
Basically real.
Oh man, saying the word performative makes me think of alt lit, which is I've been in such a fucking angry wormhole, revisiting all that stuff from like the early to mid aughts, and I don't know what to do. I need to talk to somebody about it.
Let's just read some on the pod and just get that nut out and get over it.
Should we just read Taipei?
Yeah, fuck it. I think yes.
Let's
Man.
read 12 years for life or whatever. 12 years of rules. 12 rules
12
of life.
for life. I want-
12 years of rules.
and we're off and running.
Yeah.
We're not.
that
Well,
would be-
we should read those books, but we're not reading them today.
No.
Right. Today.
Well, wait a second. Hold on. Again, the thing I'm going to do, I think it's important for our audience to know where they can find us on the internet at the beginning of the show, because no one wants
Okay.
to listen the whole time.
Up top. Let's do
Up
it.
top, Spinecrackers, patreon.com.
Housekeeping.
We have a Patreon. Go there. We post videos and we post things. You know, get in on the ground floor while you can before the rates go up. Before that stock rises like motherfucking GameStop.
We're about to gentrify ourselves.
We're about to pop off, exactly. Patreon.com/Spinecrackers, YouTube.com/Spinecrackers, Twitter.com/Spinecrackers, Instagram. No one goes to Instagram.com, but on the app, Spinecrackers.
That's true. But
No
it's
one
all the same.
Has anyone ever gone to Instagram.com on like a web browser?
I actually do that.
I do
'cause
still.
I don't have Instagram, so I actually do that if I want to look up someone's Instagram.
So you just cheat.
I'll tell you a crazy
Well,
thing.
yeah,
I only tweet from a web browser.
That I think is more normal. It's still like
Is it?
Well, more than Instagram.
Yeah.
You'd get the.
I don't even.
the-
I don't know if you can.
It is still
post
weird to do it on
from
Twitter,
a web
but
browser.
on Instagram.
You were not. You were able to post from a web browser on Instagram. No longer.
Oh, they took it away?
Yeah.
That capability is disabled.
Goddamn Zuckerberg
Canceled.
did it, didn't he?
Damn Zuckerberg.
Yes, he did. Like I think he
did.
literally. Like I mean, like unofficially from top down. Yes, he did.
That son
Right?
of a bitch.
They're the same.
Son of a bitch.
So
I'm
anyway,
Paul, by
go
the
find
way.
us on social
We should
media.
probably
Give us
say our
money.
names.
Pay for it. Pay for your literary analysis. Simp for us on Patreon.
Yes.
There you go.
If you like
If
this
you like it.
episode,
If you
though.
don't, then find
don't.
something else to do with your money. That's
Yeah,
fine.
you figure out what you do. Like
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Gosh,
I mean,
get your
you
life
gotta
together.
Figure out, yeah, like fucking get it straightened out.
Do some.
What do you
fucking
like, my man?
Work on yourself, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Speaking
like I
of
said before, I'm
Instagram,
Paul. I am Paul.
oh,
We should say our names.
Matt.
Gabe.
And I was gonna try and do a clever spin where I was like, Instagram, representations of self, and hey, listen, I'm like the cool teacher that's trying to get the kids interested in something a little older and a little, a little less well known. I'm like, it's like Instagram. Think about Instagram, like, right? You're on there, but like, is that you? And like, there's a lot of like, sort of like, text and hearsay about who you are, but like, is any of that true? And does even the conglomeration of all that stuff equate to you at all? And is your own thoughts about yourself also you? Or is it sort of all of the above?
And could
You
we
sound like
could
a
we-
freshman year, like liberal arts teacher, and it's awesome.
Well, that's what I would be if I were to have a job because I'm not educated fully.
That's not true.
fully educated. Yes.
Well, okay, I don't know what
Okay.
I mean by that,
That's a
but
good-
you know,
interesting.
the
Man, I have
subject
full
matter
confidence
of
that
someone
you could,
like
you could walk right
What?
into Harvard and just write something on the blackboard and get a job teaching. You could. You got
what
the
would that be?
brains.
Maybe the equations. Fucking
No, you
Goodwill
just write-
Hunting
Just
equations.
Some dank literary analysis.
It's literary
Right.
equations.
So, Matt, are you saying that The Real Life of Sebastian Knight by Vladimir Nabokov, which is what we're reading today,
Thank you. Yes.
are you saying that is basically, it's sort of an Instagram versus reality situation?
Yes.
Kind of, right?
I am.
All right, let's
it's
go.
Listen, I'm trying to create some sort of connective tissue between myself and all these kids these days who aren't reading because they
Kids,
think they got
come
better
on.
things to do.
Kids read.
And it's like, no, you're falling into the same traps of thought that old Nab was trying to warn you of in the fucking 30s.
Yeah, kids, get off
Okay.
your skateboards, get off your Fortnites, read a book.
Yeah, get off the Robin Hood app and start reading a book, okay?
Get off your Sega Genesis. Stop playing Aladdin. Read a book.
Stop just chugging Four Loko and
Right.
just read a book.
Dating ourselves in such a specific time. Stop drinking your
Tony
Shasta
Hawk's Pro Skater
cocktails.
1.
Hey, kids, did you guys know that Ernest Hemingway was the original Lil Uzi Vert?
Yeah, hey, I know you're thinking of Ernest P. Worrell from Ernest Scared Stupid.
Oh God, I was just gonna say that joke. Fuck.
Got you. I
So-
heard ladies talking about that. That I don't know anything about that doc, but it's on the lips of the intelligentsia here where I live.
What
People
doc?
are just the Ken Burns, the new Ken Burns doc about
don't know.
about Hemingway.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I would watch.
You
that.
guys don't? Neither of you have heard about that?
No.
No.
He's like recently in the like media not the media cycle, but like like the. He's an HBO doc subject, so a bunch of people have now suddenly had reignited interest, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm interested. Anyway,
Ken Burns looks like he's the creepiest looking person of all time.
He is. So
he's like got a
far from what I
Blagojevich
thought he
kind of
looked
haircut.
at.
Yeah.
He's got like a bowl cut, like a little boy's bowl cut from the '90s, but he's a man,
Yeah, it's so bad.
and it's
He's
gray.
Like 70 years old. Yeah.
It's so
Yeah, yeah.
creepy. And he
I
has
just
that
can't
like
believe it's
soft voice that it's just I don't know. It's so creepy.
He's like if Johnny Depp's version of Willy Wonka.
I'm trying to
had
not
gray
say
hair.
I'm trying to not say child molester, but
And I was but I get you.
legally we are not exactly. Ding, bing, 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 bing. We are not accusing Ken Burns of being a child molester.
Well,
But I
it's
mean,
still-
child
it's-
molesters relate to Lolita, which was written by Vladimir Nabokov.
That's true.
Well,
so ding dong.
Well, I was trying to relate it more to the even more, germane topic of the biography of a writer's life that is happening to Hemingway right now via Ken Burns.
Oh, that's okay. That is a tie-in.
A little closer to home, a little closer to the marrow.
All right, so Matt, what's up with this book, man? Why'd you pick this book, Vladimir Nabokov? When did this come out? 31.
No, it came out in 41.
41.
My bad.
Yeah,
I'm Nabokov's first English language only novel.
right. Significantly, the
written
first
in
thing
English.
he wrote in English specifically.
So what's your vibe? Why'd you pick this book for us to read today?
Again, I don't have a terribly profound rationale. A writer who
Interesting.
I've only read two other. Thanks, Paul. I've only read two other. Oh, uninteresting reasons why? Pretty interesting.
13 uninteresting
13
reasons why.
uninteresting reasons.
why I kill myself because I'm a teenager.
TW.
Because it's not like, again, I'm not like a incredible Murakami aficionado or fan. I've read two of his books.
Wait,
prior.
you
I've
mean
read-
Nabokov?
What did I say?
Murakami.
Murakami.
Fuck.
That's awesome.
Wow.
It's okay. To be
Blunder.
fair to the listener, Paul's background is a very sensual picture of Murakami sweating after
Yeah.
a long run, and so Matt
It
must
was
have
that-
just been
yeah.
distracted by his body.
It's up there
I'm
for
so-
distraction purposes
so
only, so
dead.
it worked.
Yeah,
My plan worked.
All my ideas got sandblasted by that beautiful glowing picture of Murakami.
He's just so
Slight
fit and
body.
confident and strong and happy.
I'm not a Nabokov aficionado,
Right.
but I'd read Pale Fire prior to this, and I read Ada and Ardor. Ada and Ardor.
I
Do you
don't
know? Which is a very long one. Which I Lolita's kind of a big gap. Like it's just one of those books that I've been told to read and therefore didn't for forever. And Ada is similarly in one sense kind of taking upon itself as the subject a taboo sexual kind of tone of incest in that one, where it's like a brother and sister who are in love and having a sexual relationship. But anyway, like those books were always very beautiful to me. He was just a very enjoyable prose stylist, in the crudest analysis. And I was just curious about what his earlier works were like, because I had not read any. And like Gabe said, just because this was like the first book written in the English language intentionally, and because we had also sort of discussed themes of exile and other books like Ugresich's book, just kind of curious. Just wanted to read it. Yes. Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of hard to go wrong, for me anyway, personally, with any Nabokov book and like kind of not enjoying at least how he certain turns of phrase and like how he writes. I personally, think he's one of the best prose stylists of like whatever the last 100 years or something.
1,000
like that.
years.
Since
Last
basically
1,000
since
years.
Jesus wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Speaking personally, this is the first Nabokov that I've read in what I would call my adult life. I had read, like you, Matt. I read Pale Fire, and I did actually read Lolita, but it was basically, I was like pretty much the age that Lolita is in the book when I read it, and it didn't
Really?
I mean, yeah, I probably read it when I was like 16 or something, 17.
Lolita's like 13, 12.
I thought she was. Oh, I guess she's like 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that goes to show how much I remember about the books. So I for all intents and purposes, this is like my first Nabokov novel in my mind, because both of those I would have to reread again to have anything intelligent to say about them. But I agree certainly in terms of the prose, and I'm sure we'll get a sense of that as we read through it tonight.
I need to reread. I really want to reread Ada because again, I think, I don't know, like a sense of my capacity to deal with more complicated writers than I was actually able to deal with in my like early teens plagued me, and I technically have read a lot of sort of important and classical works of literature when I was around 13 to 18, 19.
Yep, same.
And I'm like, I might as well have never fucking done it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to. That's what I was trying to say. Like, in my mind, I've never really read Lolita. Like, I read it, but like, I didn't. It didn't mean anything to me. I didn't get it. I didn't really get much out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just proves that when you're a teenager, you're not a real person. Is that what you're saying? You're just not.
Yeah, and therefore your teenagers don't have human rights. That's the official
They
Spine
don't. They
Crackers
shouldn't
position.
be able to vote.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not able to vote for most of the teenage years.
That was a joke.
Yeah, those are the
dry joke.
rules.
Well, yeah,
Have you read any
I've
Nabokov?
never read. No, I haven't. I know I've come close to reading Lolita, but I never have. Partially because, I had heard it was really good, but it was also just like a Tumblr theme that I just hated. In like 2010 to 15 or whatever. I was like, this seems
what was that?
gross and I don't want to get into it too much, but like
Oh, like a
it's,
Tumblr hashtag about
hypersexualized.
like jailbait pedophile Tumblr, basically.
Was it problematic?
yeah,
was
I
it
mean-
hashtag problematic?
Yeah.
Totally, it's like people like young girls and 25-year-old guys that like found it to actually just be like
Well, that's what
hot.
anime lollies are. That's a reference to Lolita, like when you say like lollies. I don't know, like all the like fucking anime fucking Nazi avatars of like little girls in fishnets. If they're not femboys, they're lollies, and it's like that's a reference to Lolita. It does have a crazy sort of current mimetic history.
Yeah. Those aren't
no,
the
I
only
haven't
two
read
genres.
any.
I want to avoid getting too deep into our knowledge of anime fetish porn, but
But
what?
I after reading this book though, I mean I think I agree with you, Matt, though, that like his prose style
gooned.
I really loved, and I'm definitely open. I'm open to reading more. I really liked how he writes.
The foreword, I feel like, which I always read after the book,
same.
but I did finally read it. Like, did a good job of kind of describing my feelings. Is that like, and I really like this book. It does feel like Nabokov himself, as he sort of young, not young, he's like in his 40s when he or late 30s when he wrote this, but like sort of critiquing slash congratulating himself throughout in these ways that are really like cheeky, and he's a big fan of like metatextual reference and cryptography and linguistic puzzles and puns and anagrams and all this kind of shit. So like he's really fun to read for that reason too.
I also thought I mean, I think, and we'll get into this after we talk about what the book is actually about, but I thought that I agree with you, Matt. I did find the introduction actually pretty helpful, written by Michael Durda, who's I think he writes for the Washington Post or something. He's like a book reviewer guy.
Can I just interject with what I meant to say, which is just that like there's a kind of elitist hauteur to the language that never fully crosses the line for me, and so that it always stays kind of pleasant,
right,
or like pleasurable to me. The condescension never like crosses a line, even though it's there, and maybe I'm a little sub, but I like love that. I love that,
Well, I think that it's and I think that there's, and Durda brings this out in the introduction, right? Like there are moments where it tonally shifts into like a kind of like a hardboiled detective novel almost, right? And it's like talking about the rainy, like gray streets, and like I thought those descriptions, some of the like atmospheric kind of tone setting descriptions of place, were some of the best in the novel for me.
Yeah,
but I also think
it kind of like.
I was just gonna say, and this is a cringe thing to say, and I'm embarrassed in advance that I'm about to say it. But the book is also about language itself. The book is about the ways in which language, either is or is not able to express, our thoughts, able to capture the sort of lived realities of our day-to-day lives, and the various ways that it falls short in that. I mean, there's like there's one of the major themes of the book, I would argue, is this tension for the narrator, between the narrator and Sebastian, between their sort of cultural and linguistic, identities, right? As Russian speakers versus English speakers, as having people with one foot in kind of old Russia and one in modern England, and so I think the book is about language in that broader sense also.
Well, I know you were nervous to oust yourself to
it's postmodern. It's fucking postmodern.
As a Derridean or whatever you want to say.
It is. Yeah, it just is.
But what I like, it is, right? Like these are the doubts that brought about those kinds of thoughts, right? Within literature. Nabokov was affected most intensely by like the modernists. Like he was infatuated with like Joyce and Proust and people like this. But yeah, like there is this seed of doubt that's blooming more and more complexly outward within the literary community about the capability of really like words communicating the truth and people knowing who they fucking are and that kind of thing.
And I mean, like that to me is like kind of it from the jump. That's what the book is about. The title is a sort of cheeky question. Life. The real life of Sebastian Knight.
The real world,
not the fake one. Yeah, exactly. It is for all you kids out there listening. This is when people stop being nice and start getting real. So
true that.
So the title itself to me is kind of a postmodern kind of linguistic challenge. What you're about to read is the real life, which is interesting because at first blush you might think the real life of someone is the life that they lived as they lived it, not a book about that life, right? Like, so right. It's just interesting from the beginning that those concerns, like from the very title, those concerns start to sort of raise their heads for me.
Yes, and the book is just this it feels like the book is just this exercise in why, in answering those questions necessarily, but raising more and complicating the ones you probably already have.
So maybe
about the notion.
maybe let's talk about what the book's about. Do you want to do a quick
Yes,
some summary, as it were?
25 minutes in.
Hey, we're
Dog, listen.
Listen.
I'm not
Look.
blaming. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just,
Those 25 minutes are about getting the listener comfortable and settled. Right?
You're right.
They're
Those
cozy.
25 minutes. Those 25 minutes are about getting everything.
Where did that
Are you making fun of my speech cadence, dude? Oh my
No.
god, dude.
I'm not.
You and your stupid sexy Murakami background can get out of here.
He is my man.
You guys really missed last week. After we recorded, you, dear listener, really missed out on our bratty Southie Boston Star Wars fan impressions. That was
Oh, I forgot about that. That was fun. Patreon only.
Right.
Patreon only. All right, Matt, what's this book about?
Well, yes, the title is kind of like this right out of the gate, a kind of a joke and a challenge, and he's being cheeky. He's being a cheeky boy, Nabokov, because it's about a Russian exile named Sebastian Knight who had to flee Russia during, the revolution, relocated to split off from his family, which was already kind of a hodgepodge culturally. Like, I believe he had an English stepmother, and
I think his mother was English. I think because I think his actual mother was English, Sebastian's.
okay,
I could be wrong.
already getting things wrong. Fuck, but this is the point.
Exactly.
He ends up, he's kind of like this gloomy, precocious, literate child. There's a lot of transmogrified and just like actual biographical data parallels between Sebastian Knight and Nabokov, which I think is also very important and intentional. Sebastian Knight flees Russia, ends up in London studying at Cambridge, and ultimately achieves status in his late 20s as a novelist, as an English novelist, and then dies at 39, I think.
Yeah, late 30s. I forget the exact
36.
age. There you go.
36 rather. And
Six. Nice.
and then a couple months later, even his his stepbrother or something. I don't know.
So the narrator
half-brother.
is
Half-brother.
half brother. Yeah, they have the same father but different mothers.
Right. Just named V, just
Yeah.
the letter V. In the margins between his actual seemingly sort of 9-to-5 regular corporate job has taken upon himself to write a biography about his brother to set the record straight, because partially in response to a what he considers very shitty erroneous biography written by someone named something Goodman.
Yeah, I don't know if we get his first name, Mr. Goodman.
Goodman,
Who
his
was
agent.
Sebastian's secretary? Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, this is all fucking wrong and rubbish.
Well, it's interesting because that, and this kind of speaks to one of the other ways in which the book is kind of fractured, temporally, because we don't that's not the original reason, right? That
Yeah.
V is writing this book but he finds that out partway through the process, and then sort of
Right,
becomes like an even more. He references the book early on, but in terms of the actual narrative of how he came to be writing his book, and that's one of the weirdest things about this book to me, is because this book, V tells us all the way through, this is it. This is the biography. But most of the book is V describing his own process about writing the biography, right?
Yeah, there's so little
Yeah.
about Sebastian. I mean, there technically is, but you never throughout the book, which V describes the thing he is himself writing, which is a biography,
Right.
do you ever feel like it's a biography?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's just like a fetch quest kind of weird, journey of him.
Detective novel, like,
It's a detective novel,
yeah.
which is a joke about, because there. This is a book about a writer by a non-writer, and there's fake novels in the book, which I always love as an
Yes.
idea. And one of those novels, I believe the first one. Fuck, man, what is it called?
So there's success. I don't think success is the first. I think
Success
that's
is
maybe
the
second.
not lost prop. Is it lost property?
It might be Lost Property is the first one in Sebastian Knight's oeuvre.
Is a parody of a detective story.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's going like, he's kind of being a little elitist, but also like having fun with the form itself, where he's like, listen, people love the detective genre because you collect all the clues and then you find out the answer and it's really satisfying, and
Right.
like that's obviously not how it works. And he's kind of like lampooning all of these conventions of that genre, the femme fatale and all of the characters that are like overly capable of sharing minute detail that no normal person would know, like the bartender who's like they did that sketch, I think, on SNL, like the bartender is like, Mrs. Derbyshire wore an opal earring. Wore opal earrings that night. Looked real nervous. She said she was in debt to somebody. I think a Mr. McIntosh. Just like a guy, just like some asshole who knows, like, narratively, just for convenience sake, knows way too much and all this.
Right.
So anyway, he's just making fun of all this shit. And then all of that is re-lampooned by actually, quote unquote, happening to V.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. Well, that's one of the things that recurs in the novel, right? Is that the events and characters and relationships from Sebastian Knight's novels sort of manifest in V's sort of pursuit of details about his life.
Yes. Yeah, and the pace is strange because, like, initially it starts off kind of wobbly, right? Like, he's just sort of recollecting things mostly, and then he finally, the detective sort of angle parody sort of starts to happen towards this latter half, where he's trying to hunt down basically a woman. And
Sebastian's mistress, right? Like the woman that he cheated on his wife with, basically.
right,
Yeah.
who like ruined his life.
Yeah. Which again, the femme fatale, right? And that's referenced a number of times in the text.
Yeah. But otherwise, what I don't know how you would even describe the first half. It's like, it is kind of a biography, but it's like, it's more like V is the half brother of Sebastian. So he's like, I kind of already am sort of a living biography of some of the stuff that Sebastian also went through. So why not just say what I went through?
Well, but one of the funniest things for me, and I don't know how you guys felt about this, or if this was something that jumped out to you as much as it did to me, was that, throughout the book, and I think, particularly, Matt, in the first half, V goes out of his way to say over and over again, like, "Oh, I'm very concerned about. I don't want to insert myself into this at all. I don't. This is not about me. This is not about me." And it's all about him. The whole thing is about him. It's all details about how he feels about something, what pissed him off about Goodman's book, and like, how he felt about being Sebastian's half brother as a child, and how Sebastian was always kind of aloof and sort of at points treated V as if he didn't even really exist, he says at one point, which I think is significant, because there's a theory, there's a sort of a bit of a conspiracy out there theory that I think we should discuss later. So again, there's those sorts of like performative contradictions. Like, this isn't about me, while everything you're doing is making it about you. And I think that's interesting from V's perspective.
Yeah. Not only
Yes.
is it like, is it apparent within the text that it's about V, but once you know the context of the story, and you know like that this is a fictionalized biography, you realize that it's even more about Nabokov than than Night, because Night's not even real. So it becomes like not just contextually about the narrator, but about the actual author that we all know now too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, so the
And there's
first
lots
kind
of
of indication.
parallels. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Oh no. So like V at one point goes, his first kind of like, I feel like, seeking out of an actual person in Sebastian's life, who is also just kind of a person in his life. I forget, it was like some governess, some they were Russian aristocracy again. Yes, or Swiss, but yes, again, another parallel also to Nabokov's life, right? Like one of the kind of remaining sort of czarist aristocratic families before he ended up fleeing. But anyway, he finds this woman, Zell, I believe her name is, and in trying to sort of like figure out biographical just sort of data about Sebastian, she ends up sort of more or less just getting kind of nostalgic and weepy.
Right.
And being like, "You're doing such a good thing. You're such a good boy." And he's like, "Okay, but like, do you remember like some hard facts about Sebastian?" She's like, "Oh no, just like please." And then she says like, "Just write that book, that beautiful book." She cried as I was leaving. "Make it a fairy tale with Sebastian for prince, the enchanted prince. Many a time have I said to him, 'Sebastian, be careful. Women will adore you.' And he would reply with a laugh, 'Well, I'll adore women too.'" And I squirmed inwardly, and she gave me a smacking kiss and patted my hand and was tearful again. I glanced at her misty old eyes, at the dead luster of her false teeth. Again, funny. At the well-remembered garnet brooch on her bosom. We parted. It was raining hard, and I felt ashamed and cross at having interrupted my second chapter to make this useless pilgrimage. One impression especially upset me. She had not asked one single thing about Sebastian's later life. Not a single question about the way he had died. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it sets the tone for like every person that he subsequently ends up meeting to question about their like particular, very specifically their very particular time when they had met Sebastian, to
Right.
create any kind of coherent narrative that like links up causally.
Well, and of course, like from my perspective, one of the things about that that paragraph that you read, Matt, is the end there, where, or it's sort of in the middle, where he says, "It was raining hard, and I felt ashamed and cross at having interrupted my second chapter to make this useless pilgrimage." And this is supposed to be V talking about the book that he's writing, but this is also the second chapter of the book Nabokov wrote, and it sort of is also an interruption in that narrative as well. So it's like, again, these like little mini meta references and meta textual sort of games that Nabokov is, kind of famous for playing. Are to be found throughout this one.
Yes, like this shit from Jump like was meant to be like kind of reread and hints
Right.
that pay off like way later or play. He has a very like craftsman sort of Swiss watch kind of approach to narrative.
And it's funny because, and this is maybe this is like probably beyond the scope of what we need to talk about, but it is funny to me that someone who played so many games with language and played so much, toyed around with like metatextuality so much, was so averse to like any sort of literary criticism and analysis, and like, certainly I think would have detested like the postmodern turn in analyzing literature. But for someone who does that sort of stuff so frequently and so, cleverly in a lot of ways, It's funny that he hated that shit so much.
That is strange.
I didn't know that about him because, like, yeah, this is blatantly to me a very postmodern novel. The motives of it are completely postmodern to me. It's like it's more about the trickery and the play of words and the confusion set up for the reader than anything else. Like there's a lot of great characterization, and I walked away like thinking that I liked the characterization of Knight, and I thought he was a very like strong character and kind of like a meme character of just like the, you know, distraught artist writer type who can only be creative, and they're just kind of, I don't know, obtuse in a way, or just like kind of not great to be around if you're just like a normal person. Kind of meet this person on the street and they're like, you'd be like, this guy's a fucking asshole and he's slimy and gross. But yeah, I would say that like I don't know. I thought that Nabokov's whole point was just to be postmodern. Maybe that term wasn't even around by then, but it's all about the confusion of words and confusing the reader.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was, but I think it was.
Not in the way that, certainly not in the way we think of it today. I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Partially, it feels like maybe as a challenge to make sure that wasn't ultimately what people thought, which is what ended up being what people thought, right? That there's a kind of meaninglessness or inescapable prison you enter every time someone decides to write something. And it's just like, damn, is that really true? I'm nervous about it. I'm going to sort of address the concerns, but I don't believe it, and I find it abhorrent were it to be true or something like that, right?
Keep going. I don't totally know what you mean.
Like, right, postmodernism as an idea. I mean, there's also just like this idea that like modernism never ended; it was just heightened, and that postmodernism is a stupid term because like we have not actually escaped the questions raised and the sort of aesthetic and compositional challenges proffered by modernism, and postmodernism is just like, you know, like. What if we're trapped in our own sort of abstract conceptions of thought and symbology and stuff, like, you know, and then people like Kurt Gödel get abused by proving like that there's no connotationalist mathematical language that is better than, you know, written language, to avoid all of the paradoxes of written language. Even in math you can't do that, and et cetera. But like, I feel like he's not. Yeah, he would abhor. There is no outside text. I think he's way more of. Hey, Gabriel. I think there's way more of maybe like it's complicated, like a relationship status complicated for language and reality, and that those things interpenetrate and are like going to just require a lot more vigilance in understanding, whereas there maybe is, in a sense, some in postmodernism some throwing up of the hands and going like, it's over, right? The novel is dead, it's over, we can't get at truth of any kind, and we should stop trying.
Do you think
I don't mean that's the case for everybody, and not Nabokov, and I don't think that's the case of every like quote unquote postmodern thinker, but that's the fear, right? And that's the avoided, or the attempting to avoid that kind of conclusion as being persuasive.
Right. What were you going to say, Paul?
I was just going to ask if you think that like those were his intentions only. Like, do you think that he was only responding to, you know, prose as it was during his time with this novel, or do you think he was trying to like expand beyond that while using this way of writing? Because I think that's one criticism I have, is I feel like it's it's entirely just making a point about how novels are written and how certain writing styles can influence the reader's, perspective. I feel like it was kind of like shallow, maybe not at the time, but reading it now, I feel like I just felt it was a little bit shallow and yeah, I don't know, shallow.
It
is
was
the word
it
that
was
comes to
written
my
at the
mind.
at probably the beginning of a certain line of thinking that has now been elaborated upon almost to exhaustion, and so we're at the like exhausting. We've talked about it too much point. Looking back at the time, yeah, probably when it was like a pretty fresh, line of inquiry.
I do think
Yeah.
I do think that Nabokov stages this debate about kind of author intent and that like and the influence of kind of the cultural milieu on authors and that sort of thing a couple times in the book. Like one of the I'm on page 66 right now and I'm looking at one of the sort of V's descriptions of his problems with Goodman's description of Sebastian. And V essentially rejects out of hand the possibility that Knight was influenced in any way by his historical or cultural context, and he sort of says like he would have been. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter sort of when he was born, where he was born. It would just be he would be the same person either way. And
Right.
and Goodman thinks that he talks about post-war and this and that, and he uses all these terms that are sort of implying a cultural socio-political influence, and V is strenuously against that mode of interpretation.
Right. But I don't think it's an uncomplicated rejection of even necessarily Goodman's analysis of certain things. I think this is why I really liked the book, and why I think Nabokov is just a really fun writer to read. Is like he doesn't have the last thing he has are kind of uncomplicated feelings about the books he's writing and like what they mean, and like Goodman is kind of shown to be silly, but he's only shown as silly. You never read you read some passages like excerpts via what V chooses to show you about it. But Goodman himself, he's just kind of ridiculous in the eyes of V, and it's largely because
It's the classic sort of like overly academic, like ridiculous.
right. He's like, how dare he try and Gabe, you've been involved in these kind of debates recently, like, how dare you drag this man into the socio-political milieu of his time? How dare you let politics rear its head, or social issues rear their ugly head?
Yes.
But it's not clear to me that
Those people
Nabokov
mostly
rejects
just mean
that.
Disney.
They just mean that Disney Plus didn't deliver.
Black Star Wars?
Well, get the fuck out of here. So yeah, what I like is that Goodman, if you're not supposed to take V at his word, and therefore Goodman is not necessarily just like this like comically wrong guy.
Right.
He just brought his own also subjective perspective to bear, maybe a little too intensely on Sebastian's work, but so does V.
And I don't even know if we have the ability to determine whether or not Goodman overstepped, right? Like that's part of the complexity of this, is that, as you say, Matt, we only have V's impressions of it, right? We only have what V says about Goodman's book, and even the quotes. And there's a moment where he's quoting Goodman, and he kind of says, he's using ellipses, and he says, "The dots are not Mr. Goodman's tremolos, but denote sentences I have kindly left."
Exactly right. Gabe, I think you're muted.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
you're muted.
Yeah, start over.
I was just saying, did you hear the quote or not?
Yeah.
Yes, the ellipses are not Mr.
Tiny
Goodman's
left
tremolos.
out.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But, of course, then that sort of is, you know, how would our interpretation change if we had read the full text and not just V's gloss of it?
Right.
Well, also Goodman's potential novel would potentially be more of a straightforward biography than V's. V's is not a classic biography by any means. It's like solely from his perspective, and it's, you know, you get snippets of Knight's life, but it's more like you said, a detective journal entry almost of like, and it's sporadic.
we
and
just
bounces
read it.
around in time.
If
It's
anything,
clearly not a biography.
If anything, the most that we get of Sebastian is long quoted passages of his already published novels.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get a lot of you know, his childhood life and how, you know, not like very in-depth
That's true.
depictions of
That's true.
personal experiences, but in the first like maybe 30 pages you get a lot of, you know, how he grew up, and you get so much characterization that you actually wouldn't get in a more simple biography. I think that actually, I don't know, I was kind of thinking that Nabokov was writing this as a way to throw out the idea that this might be a better way to write a biography, because I feel like you end up getting a better sense of this person, Sebastian, in a much more personalized way, because it's like, you know, written by a half brother, family member, and of course it's, you know, it's fictionalized, but I don't know. I feel like there almost wasn't a lot of information left out that I was dying to get about him. Like you get it from a different perspective, but you get the play-by-plays of his life. You get every novel he makes, how he wrote it, and personalized depictions of certain points of his life. And of course, V is trying to chase down this one woman towards the end. And you get a completion of that story and who she was, and that also informs you of Sebastian and his characterization too, by like getting a characterization of this woman who ends up kind of being a you know, femme fatale succubus type bad person. So I don't know.
More like a manic pixie dream girl.
Right.
A little bit of that, but
Yeah.
with a big Slytherin side to her, for sure.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And I you know, I've been kind of trying to bite my tongue on the comparisons to the Museum of Unconditional Surrender because of
Yeah. There's a lot.
I've referenced it otherwise, but you know, the exile angle to everything, beautiful. The other deeply important aspect of Nabokov and Sebastian Knight's therefore character is like exile and the question of like, you're already misplaced. You've already been ejected from a context that would give you the feeling of a sort of completed, continuous identity. So you're already asking those questions, and then the further question of like, now that I'm already on that train of thought, like, what is it to accurately describe my life biographically? And then Ugresich's thing, yeah, it's all these weird fragments that shift between fictional and more realistic, and she very strenuously in that book is like trying to disorient you almost, or not trying, but like that's the mode she feels is most accurate to a kind of reality, and it's very often the least quote unquote capital R real type of storytelling.
By real there, do you mean like direct or like straightforward?
Data
Yeah.
relayed to you, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like in the way I always wonder, like, when are we going to get biographies because of the internet that are just like user history data, like a dossier essentially, like 1,000-page fucking dossier of like shopping behavior and
Right.
like information about just like where they lived and where they went to school, and just like literally like fucking Excel spreadsheets of shit. I feel like we're gonna get that biography at some point.
Well, I mean, I do think that gets back to
It'd be
Paul's-
interesting.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to Paul's point, which I think is a good one, which is that, you know, I actually agree that there's not a lot of like glaring material facts that are left out of this, right? The guy had a relatively short life. He lived here, he moved here, he had sex with this woman, he had sex with that woman, he wrote these books. Most
We
of
can't
that,
read those books, which is huge, but yeah.
well, yeah, of course. But most of those sort of material details are in this text, and yet we still come away with the sense that the dude is essentially still a complete fucking mystery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted to.
but I actually,
Go for it.
I was just wanted to respond to that real quick. Is like one problem I have. This is a very grandiose, blatant, probably dumb statement, but one one aspect that I've had about historians and like forever, and in school or whatever, and people on YouTube or whatever talking about historical events, is they tend to fictionalize their views of whatever historical event is happening, and they do it in like a very particular way, and it's romanticized, and it's like each individual historian has their own depiction of Greek history or whatever. There's always a fictionalized element to a historical event or biography, especially when like it's too far in the past that there's not enough like physical depictions of it. And I thought maybe that Nabokov was trying to take that angle too. Is like you never totally know the truth, so why not like write a fake truth about
I think
I
he's
don't know, I just thought that
absolutely
made
making
me
that point.
Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. Like, I wanted to read like a just little block quote about Goodman before we can sort of like leave him. This is V writing about Mr. Goodman. He says, I, for one, would have ignored that book altogether had it been just another bad book, doomed with the rest of its kind to oblivion by next spring. The Lethian Library, for all its incalculable volumes, is, I know, sadly incomplete without Mr. Goodman's effort. But bad as the book may be, it is something else besides, owing to the quality of its subject. It is bound to become quite mechanically the satellite of another man's enduring fame. As long as Sebastian Knight's name is remembered, there always will be some learned inquirer, conscientiously climbing up a ladder to where the tragedy of Sebastian Knight keeps half awake between Godfrey Goodman's Fall of Man and Samuel Goodrich's Recollections of a Lifetime. Thus, if I continue to harp on the subject, I do so for Sebastian Knight's sake. Like, so I do think there's an interesting also addition of what you were. I mean, I think it relates to what you were saying, Paul. Like, having written the book, you also do create a little pocket of not necessarily misinformation, but if you, I don't know, if you achieve some sort of notoriety or like you supply more ammunition to certain perspectives, and you will be something that will be referenced, and that will affect future generations' perspectives on an event or a person or whatever, and that like it's also not a non-event to create something like a book about a person or a place or an event.
And this is also, I think, something that happens in the text too, right? There's a scene, and because this is another like kind of archetypically postmodern concern, right? Which is the way that language is capable of like creating its own kind of like internally consistent worlds and its own kind of like and that we are not necessarily capable of like distinguishing the real world, right, or the real life in this case, from the worlds that we create intertextually with via language. And so there's a scene in the book where I forget who walks in on him. I don't remember if it's Claire or somebody else. Claire is his wife. Where he's just finished writing a book and he's like laying sprawled out on the floor, and he like makes some reference to being God on the seventh day, and he's like, I've just created a world and I'm resting. And that's kind of the same task that V is engaged in here in terms of creating a reality, not the reality, a reality about Sebastian's life.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think I brought this up before, but I do feel like Nabokov was kind of creating like a meme character for maybe even how he felt about himself too. Like maybe I thought he was kind of making fun of himself. Like he saw himself as Sebastian Knight, which is very clear in the last like page as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think probably.
But I did kind of get the sense that he was poking fun of himself by using a different version of himself.
Poking fun how? Like, say more about that.
Like, you know, Sebastian's characterization is just like this lazy, kind of gruff guy who like can't really take care of himself. He's like, I wish I underlined it, but there's a great passage early on about like just how he interacts with the world. He's just like lazy and just like can't really end up doing things for himself. He can't like stay cleanly. He can't you know, just keep up with things around the house. All he knows how to do is write and think about writing. And
Right.
He's very precious.
I thought that very precious. I think there's a part early on too where he's like laying in bed. I think it might be even in his dorm room, and he's just laying and like smoking cigarettes. And every once in a while he'll like turn.
It's
to
like
V
3
and
in the
say
afternoon.
some, like,
Yes.
and just say something about God, and he'll come in like an hour later, and he's like turned to his other side and putting his cigarette out in his like his slipper, and then he comes out like an hour later again, and he just has like this new poem that he's excited about. And I don't know, it just seemed like a meme character. Not to say that it wasn't really well characterized, but I thought that potentially Nabokov was making fun of this type of person.
Yeah, because there's also the account of the sort of femme fatale figure in his life, the one that, fairly or not, is regarded as having ruined his life, who was just like, the dude was annoying. He was like whiny, and I was trying to have a good time and like fuck some guys at this hotel.
Right.
And like this dude like would come in like with a cane, chain smoking, and like tell me that I was like vain and didn't know what like true happiness was, and I was like, bro, you suck. And that was kind of like the last account that V gets of his half brother.
and it affects him, right? It really, he doesn't want that to be, you know, it's disturbing to him that that's how this person saw Sebastian, given what he understands about their relationship. Like,
right.
You know, he kind of was like, wow, could my brother really have been this person? Was this, you know, or is this woman really just being ungenerous? Is her memory? And again, right, we're talking about memory, and we're talking about the way we construct realities out of the past and sort of our experiences of it. And he's kind of, well, maybe she's just misremembering, maybe she's just being unfair, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I like that whole thing though, because I mean that character, I forget her name. Was she ever named? Yeah, she was named, but I don't remember.
Helene?
But I like
Yeah,
that whole
I think so.
couple, those like 3 or 4 chapters where he tracks her down and starts having this interaction with her, because
Madame
basically
Lecerf.
she's he doesn't realize until the end of their meeting together that she is the actual girl that he hooked up with, that Sebastian was hooking up
She's
with.
using some sort of false
kept
name,
claiming-
right?
Originally, she says it's
Was
like
she?
her friend.
Yeah, and
she
he goes
she
on this,
lies
you know,
about who she is.
mostly just to get V to like hang out with her more.
She's trying to have sex
Very
with V.
Slytherin move. She's trying to have sex with V, and V gets kind of a horn dog moment, and he wants to have sex with her too. And you know,
He
he
keeps
almost
it
goes
fucking
to-
Volcel, and he's like, no.
But yeah.
Yeah,
He
She's
simps,
lying.
though. He
he's a
simps.
strong.
For a second, he has a moment of weakness. Then he becomes, you know, he comes back to the brotherhood, and he's like, nah.
I thought it was really funny, the moments where he was just like, you know, there's no sexual tension before, but it kind of slowly builds up, and he's just like, yeah, I left her place and I was looking at her bosoms, and then I left. Like it kind of slowly builds until he's like staring at the mole on her cheek and like just wanting to kiss her so bad.
He was
And
like,
then that
I hate to, He's like, I hate to phrase it in such a way, but there was a moment when I did consider making love to this woman.
Right.
And I was like, you don't have to be so demure about it. I get you.
Horny.
Yeah.
He just had he's
Horny.
horn dog. You got horny. Oh, I'm horny.
Right. But it's like, what's so interesting is that like that's the culmination of several false starts.
Right.
I don't know how
So he meets this. He meets.
Well,
this...
no, because le Search, or I don't know how you would say that in French. She. I want to make it clear that it's not also for sure that she's the person who met Sebastian. It's
That's
just also
true.
never like for sure.
Right.
'Cause there's a couple other candidates. He narrows it down to like 4 names off of a hotel ledger that he gets a detective to find for him.
That guy fucking owns. That detective is the man.
He rocked his
That
accent.
guy,
He was
yeah, he was awesome.
well. I mean, the foreword also tells you that he's like mirrors some other character in a Sebastian Knight book, which I had not picked
Right.
up on while reading.
Right.
But the effect
The
was
funny thing
similar
about
of,
that-
like, he's the most real person.
The funny thing about that too is right before he meets him like by chance on the train, right? The detective.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really, like he had just gone to the hotel, and I thought that scene where he talks to like the concierge at the hotel was so funny because he's trying to be a detective and trying to get information, and I read it as just like he was acting the worst way possible to try to get information from someone. He wasn't
sucked.
charming at all. He was just like getting down straight to the point, like I have to ask you this. Can I see your books from like June of 1929? And the guy was just like, no, it's like private. He just like he did the worst job possible to try to get the information from
I
him.
think like V does generally come off as kind of like incompetent or kind of like
Yes.
a dum-dum, like kind of a goofball.
Yeah.
In that instance, kind
Yeah.
of like a pervert, because he's like,
Right.
do you have who stayed here? And the guy's like, well, we keep meticulous records because we're a very professional business. And
Was
he's
there
like,
a woman
yeah,
that stayed
and he was
here?
like, yeah, was there like a woman quite attractive? And do you have her address?
books? Can I see
Yeah.
the woman?
Was there an address? And he's
What?
like, you cannot have that. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Ugh," and he just gets mad. It's like, no, the fucking hotel, whatever, like, hotelier was way in the right there. Fucking V is so weird. He just seems like a serial killer rapist in that moment.
Yeah, but how I read that scene too was like if he approached it differently, he probably could have got the information. He just like he didn't rely on any sympathy, like, oh my brother died and I'm trying to track down. He didn't say any of that. Like, I'm trying to track down the last woman that whatever. It was just like,
Yeah.
can I have the names, please?
Can I have it?
just-
Can I have
it
your
was-
number?
Hey
That's
there,
all it is.
Hey there, Miss New Booty.
It's just Mr. Steal Your Girl out. Yeah. And you're right, though, Paul, right? Like, Sebastian Knight, I don't think is meant to be in any way just sort of like this pristine, pure figure. He's a moody, privileged, like, pampered, weird guy who, like, has a ton of failings and who, like, you know, especially you get the sense of that the most with Claire, who,
Right.
like, I don't know what symbolically this might mean, but she's blind by the time V meets her.
Yep.
And then she dies in childbirth afterwards, after, like, the initial accidental meeting, because Claire's new husband is like, don't fucking talk to my wife about this, like, weird bohemian dude that she used to see that she's all fucked up about. Like, don't even bring that up. She's going to get upset. But, like, Sebastian seems terrible to her in the service of what, you know? Like, the involutions of his, like, solipsism in some sense, like his dreams he's obsessed with, which is something that, again, Nabokov was very obsessed with. He took a very meticulous dream diary his whole life, and that was very tied to also his weird notions about time. And I think it is worthwhile to, like, restate that, like, the parallels to the biography of Nabokov himself, especially as, like, his first kind of, like, English language novel or whatever, as an exile, play a big part. You know, like, he is, I think, in a sense, talking about and parodying and complimenting himself all at once.
Well, even something like, you know.
You're muted, Gabe. Oh, sorry. No,
Oh.
no, you're not.
Okay. I was like, all right.
When I heard you, I was like, I'm not hearing you, which was very weird.
You're not fucking hearing me, dude. But even something like Sebastian's kind of dual, you know, English, like Anglo and Russian background that he's constantly sort of like fighting with. Early on in the book, V describes a moment when Sebastian came back to visit them after having been in Cambridge for a little while, and he has this very like overly affected kind of like British accent and British like manner of dress and the way he
like Madonna.
Exactly. And so I think that, you know, this being Nabokov's first book written in English, those sorts of concerns about, national identity and sort of like how you identify in terms of thinking about like your language and your culture and your background were like in the front of his mind, it seemed to me pretty clearly. And that is another kind of parallel that really comes through with Sebastian as a character.
Well, like linguistic efficacy, right?
Right.
Like Nabokov himself describing English as like a very thin and unmusical and kind of language that he was unfamiliar with, to the extent that it was a detriment to his ability to even express himself in the somewhat artificial realm of literature. So that like writing in English, he was having all of these same probably panics about how turns of phrase and how he was able to like say what he wanted to say,
which I also think probably feeds into what we've sort of been calling the the postmodern sort of tone of the novel, or some of the postmodern concerns. That one of the main sort of features of postmodernism, literarily at the very least, and in general probably as well, is a kind of concern about language. And language is like, what can language do, what can't it do, how should we think about the sorts of purposes that we put language to. That strikes me as something that Nabokov is deeply concerned about in this novel, through the character of Sebastian Knight, but also through the character of V, who's sort of constantly like, I don't know if I've captured this right, this memory is kind of has faded, this, I could be fucked up about this detail or whatever. And of course he is.
Yeah.
I have a passage that I want to read about this.
Yeah.
So this is describing Knight's trying to write, I think in English. So anyway, this is the bottom of 83 going on to 84. His struggle with words was unusually painful, and this for two reasons. One was the common one with writers of his type: the bridging of the abyss lying between expression and thought, the maddening feeling that the right words, the only words, are awaiting you on the opposite bank in the misty distance, and the shudderings of the still unclothed thought clamoring for them on this side of the abyss. He had no use for ready-made phrases because the things he wanted to say were of an exceptional build, and he knew moreover that no real idea can be said to exist without the words made to measure. And to me, that's kind of both the struggle, like to me that passage exemplifies both the struggle with the postmodern struggle with language, that it can't, there's never the right words, right? You always think there are, but it's never, the words that we have in our language are never one-to-one analogs of whatever the fuck it is that's going on in
it's
our brain.
Never
it's just not possible, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, that passage also sort of speaks to the fact that, at the same time as they are inadequate and fail and don't express sort of what we want them to express in various ways, they are also all we have. And that is also sort of the world, the way we are able to construct reality is through language. And if that's not fucking postmodern, I don't know what is.
Right. Yeah. I kind of just agree with you that he's just sort of like, obviously the quandaries that became labeled as postmodern started earlier, and he's part of that exemplary tradition of pushing that conversation forward. I do think it is interesting, like whether or not it's just sort of hypermodernism, though.
Sorry,
Excuse me?
I unmuted the wrong thing. I was watching the Zoom and I unmuted the Zoom and not the right thing.
Damn. Technical difficulties, as they say.
Yeah. Can you draw that distinction a little more clearly, Matt? Like what?
Not really.
Okay.
I just like.
Because yeah.
Like, because once again, modernism to me is not a clear concept. I've watched a bunch of lectures. I've tried to get it straight. It's not for lack of trying, but part of my understanding of modernism is that it's just like an involutions of self awareness about influence and, again, the limitations of language and this kind of thing, meeting a sort of cultural history on which to still graft these things and derive meaning. Like, have we stopped doing that? Is it just a sort of complicated modernism as opposed to something called postmodernism? Again, which is itself like a somewhat nitpicky, hair-splitting linguistic issue that I don't know how to talk about very well. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Paul?
I wanted to ask, like, in terms of, maybe Gabe, you want to respond to that, but
No, not particularly. And it's an interesting distinction, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure how to flesh it out. It sort of feels like a distinction without a difference to me at this point. But I'm open.
Maybe
that's
maybe
that's true. I don't know. I think what I wanted to ask, because I don't know enough about postmodernism or modernism really, is like the quote you read before, Gabe. Is it more postmodern to come to the conclusion that words can't depict the truth, so therefore we shouldn't write anything? Or is it more postmodern to come to the conclusion that the language and the ability to write as we have it is the only way we can communicate, so therefore that's acceptable?
I mean, I think of those two options, it's the latter. It's not that because language, which this was sort of Wittgenstein's position, which is that that of which we cannot speak, we must pass over in silence. That's not the postmodern position, in the sense that the postmodernists, generally speaking, think that language is actually all we have, but it is also at the same time imperfect and sort of like false in many ways, and has gaps and has sort of like like as he says in even that quote, like unbridgeable chasms, right? Like that we can never fully cross the gap between our ability to express our inner life via language and the reality of that inner life for us, right? Like that's one part of the postmodern sort of position. The other one is that at the same time, those linguistic expressions are themselves realities, right? Like we make worlds with our language together, and sort of what we agree on linguistically starts to constitute a type of reality. I think the point being that, like, and again, this is kind of the sandbox Nabokov seems to be playing in here to me. The very concept of the one singular real life of Sebastian Knight is in and of itself kind of a ridiculous concept.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to what I was talking about too, about like actual even historians talking about historical events. Like I was listening to one podcast, I think it's Dan something. He does hardcore history.
Dan Carlin.
Dan Carlin. And he does a whole episode or a few episodes about Greek history. And one of the most prominent historical documentations we have is by a Roman historian who actually took, a lot of the Greek historical information and kind of fictionalized it and played it up and made it a little more spicy. But that's kind of the only depictions.
Herodotus?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
There's a falsehood to his historical documentation, though, but it's all we have of a lot of these historical events.
Yeah.
But that also makes me think of just like, if you're the type of person that only finds truth in like the individual's depiction of any event, like say if you were at the freaking, I don't know, Lincoln assassination, is it the only way you can really understand it is if you were there? But even if you were there, like there's tons of people there and they all have different perspectives and interactions with what happened.
I think
They're
that's
all be different.
I think
And
that's part.
I just think that relates to I think that relates to even the character of the femme fatale who, saw Sebastian in a certain light and V saw him in this totally different light. And I don't know, I just thought that was interesting.
No, I think that's a really good example, and that's kind of like part of the bigger point, which is that the Lincoln assassination or V's relationship with this woman, or Sebastian's relationship with this woman, the postmodernists don't think that there's no things, right? Like that there's no, right? Like there are things.
Yeah.
The Lincoln assassination happened on a certain day, right? That's true, right? The Lincoln assassination happened at a certain place. But like, what does the Lincoln assassination mean, right? What was Sebastian's relationship with this woman in some final absolute sense? There's no answer to that. There just isn't there's just no answer to that question. Or at best, there is a like infinite multiplicity of answers to that question. Right? So for Sebastian, his relationship with this woman was one thing. For the woman, it was something else. Helene, right? That's who we're talking about. For V, it's something else. And for for the friends, it's something else, right? So the idea that there is, again, this one reality, this one narrative that we can find if we just peel back enough layers, that's fundamentally, I think, what postmodernism is kind of is challenging.
Right. And like
I kind of agree with that, though.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like there's no.
Gabe likes that.
Welcome to the club.
There's no like E equals MC squared for an interaction you have ever, right?
Yes.
It's not just like one.
Dude, that's
final
it.
Truth.
Well, there's the implications of
you
E
were
equals
postmodern.
MC squared. Are you kidding me? Diridian. Derrida. Derridaddy.
Well, if you're a Lacanian, you have all the mathemes he loved. And they're not formal.
I don't even know. I
Never
don't know
mind.
what that is.
Doesn't matter.
It's there are as many for things like that. There are as many interpretations as there are subjectivities to interpret.
But isn't that related to most things, though?
Yes.
Yes.
However, right, like E equals MC squared. Like, oh man.
Let's dive into
that. I got uncomfortable because I'm not qualified to speak.
Me either, but isn't it, I mean, that's the grand unifying theory of, or no, that isn't.
It's not, but like
they're searching for that.
That is an equation, right? That sort of like crystallizes particular concepts symbolically, right? And therefore there is like, it does represent something pretty broad, in a sense. Like the capacity of that is very broad. And then obviously, famously, it gets used for nuclear weaponry. And the nuclear fission, and the atomic bomb, which were unintentional consequences that people like Einstein and Oppenheimer were unhappy about. Again, I could be fucking wrong about this, but like that, then it gets subjective though, right? You know what I mean? Like there's like what this kind of knowledge makes you capable of doing as represented symbolically in equations or words, and then there's like the acts we use it to do, and the interpretations of those acts by subjectivities specifically in like moral senses and things like this for like the atomic bomb, but like it's not a bad kind of way to encapsulate certain things that are complicated about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could be off my shit. I am off the range. Like I this is where I start to get nervous about my ability.
Yeah,
to,
let's start
to-
talking about
to-
quantum
to
mechanics
talk.
right now, and then just. Go
So there's like 12. What with super strings? What is it?
No.
There's
so
like
a particle could be like on
Fuck!
Earth and like on the other side of the universe at
The
the
God
same
particle.
exact time.
yeah, the God particle, right?
Strange action at a distance.
Strange attracting.
Spooky
The
action at a
Stranger
distance.
Things.
Spooky action at a distance. That's-
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, Stranger Things.
The Lorenz attractor.
Okay, so here's speaking of this. Honestly, maybe this is a bit obscure, but it made me think of this other passage where I think Nabokov expresses through V the kind of like dumb view of this whole approach, like this idea that you can reconstruct perfectly someone's life if you just nail down this and that detail or whatever. It's on page 120.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is I forget who he's talking to here.
I have this completely outlined. Yeah, as
okay,
well.
Okay, great. So they're talking about this at this point in the novel, this mysterious femme fatale who V has gotten it into his head. She kind of like ruined Sebastian's life. She smashed his life. That sums her up, doesn't it? No, I want to know more. I want to know all. Otherwise, he will remain as incomplete as your picture. Oh, it is very good. The likeness is excellent, and I love the floating spider immensely. Especially, so I guess he's talking to Sebastian's portrait painter, right? The guy that,
Right.
Roy Carswell or whatever?
Yes, which is another just sort of like scene of like representation
And mirroring and your reflection being
Right.
distorted because he's looking into a pool. I think we should talk about that, too.
he's Narcissus specifically.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Um,
And water striders are like messing up his likeness within the painting. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's cool.
It's really good. So sorry. Oh, it is very good. The likeness is excellent, and I love that floating spider immensely, especially its club-footed shadow at the bottom. But the face is only a chance reflection. Any man can look into water. But you don't think that he did it particularly well. Yes, I can see your point, but all the same, I must find that woman. She is the missing link in his evolution, and I must obtain her. It's a scientific necessity. I'll bet you this picture that you won't find her, said Roy Carswell. And I just think that line, it's a scientific necessity to find this woman that V has like latched onto as being critically important in Sebastian's development or in his life or whatever. That phrase, scientific necessity, to me is very sort of important because that's kind of the dum-dum view. That the idea that if you just put all the pieces together, if you lay it out in a sort of, objective way, you'll get the real thing. You'll get the truth.
Right. Yeah. I think it's important to note that, unless anyone's unaware, that Nabokov himself was a lepidopterist, and he collected butterflies, and he contributed, I believe, to some sort of like advancement in the understanding of butterflies, and like he was himself sort of like a scientist in some levels. Classic
Right.
meme, right? I am.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yes. Which is an image that recurs because for Nabokov, specifically regarding butterflies, he kills them to taxonomize them. And it's not just butterflies, but moths and things. And a lot of those have a big thing for him was like camouflage, like natural camouflage. And like the fact that like a moth or a butterfly can look like tree bark or can look like animal eyeballs and things like this, because it is nature like mimetically feigning other things within itself in order to deceive to survive. And like I think that's just like a really cool sort of thing that Nabokov ran with throughout his literary career as like a idea.
So I mean, when you first started, I thought he was like kind of like the head of Butterfly World, and he just loved butterflies being on his shoulders, and then
he does as well.
Kills them like Buffalo Bill is.
Yes, yes, dude. Buffalo Bill's not the worst example you could have pulled. Yes.
That's all I'm thinking about now is that Nabokov was just.
You don't know what pain is.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Nabokov, despite it, whatever, this is really neither here nor there, but from what I understand,
pain is.
The guy interpersonally was generally pretty cheery and happy and like not like a creepy weirdo at all. And it's just funny that when you think about Nabokov's works, you think about Lolita, which is like some kind of creepy pedo shit, and you think about obviously whatever. Well, that's a separate conversation. But you think about all these sort of dark and sad and kind of creepy works, and apparently the dude as an individual was none of that.
What I love about Lolita, again, having not read it, not about Lolita, but like sort of
the Lolita
ancillary
discourse.
Ancillary to Lolita was that Vera, right, Nabokov's wife.
Mm-hmm.
She would forever from the moment he published the book onward, there were literal pedophiles who would like send
Yes.
Like mail him and call him and his wife and stuff and be like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for humanizing our experience and like furthering a sort of what we regard as an acceptance of like our point of view. And Vera would call the police if she ever got a return address. She would call the police and be like, "This fucker is a pedo. Put him in jail." Because obviously that was like not at all Nabokov's point.
Just
for that specific novel.
the NAMBLA people just emailing now.
Yeah.
Just
the
Nabokov.
nasty libertarians.
Ugh, God, the worst.
Right. Which again, that book is all about. Again, to speak of like the beautiful camouflaged, or the grotesque camouflage as the beautiful. Like that.
Yeah.
That's like that book in particular is all about
Yes.
that. Like, here's how art can fucking. In a way that kind of, I was thinking of Bolaño and like even stuff as crass as like science fiction, but like here's how something abhorrent can find purchase in the aesthetic mind if you're too like artistically inclined.
Right.
Which is funny because Nabokov is also somebody who is often attributed as being someone who, like we said before, Gabe, when you had this argument online, like
Shout out to the last Sisyphus.
yeah, fucking
Bad arguments, dude.
Yes, not that many brain cells argument was like you can't subtract you can extract this from this, you can extract the political or the import
That the aesthetic and the
from anything
political
else.
are separable. It's
which
dumb.
is a fancy way of just saying like the aesthetic and the ethical, I would say, in some form.
It's
right?
really just a fancy way of saying I wish Disney was not hiring black people.
Listen, have you seen the director list for the next 5 MCU movies?
That's
They're all
literally
women.
it. That's literally it. That's all.
Doug,
They're
I
all
watched-
women of
Okay,
color.
I know.
And like, what the hell?
I don't want to slander him. Hey, Colin, if you're out there, hit us up. Let's have a debate about it.
We will
Yeah,
talk.
jump
I
on the
would
podcast.
absolutely
Dead ass.
willing. Yeah, no cap for that. That we will talk to you about whatever. But I watched a Mortal Kombat movie yesterday, and it shit.
It was
It's
bad.
just shit.
I heard it was bad.
Wait, the new one?
Yeah, man.
I was kind of.
Oh shit!
It sucks
God.
because I was kind of
I've been
optimistic
hyped.
about it.
Me too.
I've been
Going
hyped
in,
for
I was
it.
like, and I was optimistic in the sense I'm like, okay, dumb action
Yeah, of
movie,
course.
like fucking fatality. Show me.
Right.
It sucked.
Oh
Sucked.
god,
Boo.
I'm bummed.
Right?
I'm
It has
dead.
nothing to
Coming
do with
for myself.
wokeness. I don't care who was what color. Just
Was that a
please
thing?
give me a
Were people
fucking.
critiquing that movie for being too woke?
No, not at all. That's one of those
Hashtag-
movies that it was just more like it was like gritty in a way that it was gritty in the wrong places and then like serious in the wrong places and then like cartoony in the wrong places. It
I
sucked.
guess I'll just have to wait for the Tekken 3 movie.
Is there going to be a
Tekken
Tekken
Tag.
3 movie?
That'd be awesome.
Sick.
Yeah, get the panda character in there.
So, a couple more
Yoshimitsu.
thoughts that I have.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Or,
Good thoughts.
a number of more actually. I feel like kind of the central, maybe not the central. I have another, okay. One of the other themes about this text is identity, it seems to me, right? We've talked a little bit about cultural identity, national identity, linguistic identity, and that sort of thing. But also just like personal identity. There's moments where V sort of like talks as if Sebastian's ghost is like actively guiding his writing of this book. And he sort of feels Sebastian's like presence in the things that he does. And then of course, Paul, you referenced it a little bit earlier, the final kind of paragraph opens the door to a number of different interpretations that V and Sebastian are actually the same people. It's one person, that neither of them ever existed, and this is like what that fucking, I forget the name of the show, but that sitcom where it at the last episode it's just, everything was in a snow globe the whole time. That there it's
Mad
all
Men.
sort of, no, it's not Mad Men. But that Nabokov is making a sort of like meta claim about him being in control of all this, or that that we are actually reading Sebastian's fictionalized autobiography, because there are a couple of points in the book where V recounts Sebastian saying, my final book is going to be a fictional autobiography.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
And so the last section, right? So basically what happens is, and there's a couple moments like this, right? This is another one where something that happens in one of Sebastian's books parallels V's experiences. V goes to see Sebastian after he has a heart event, a cardiac event. And he's in the hospital, and he is, tries to get there in time, and blah, 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 blah. And the nurse leads him into this room, and he has this like and it's beautifully described. Maybe we should read some of it, but he has this very moving experience sitting there listening to his half-brother kind of breathing and sleeping, and like it's very touching, and it like is very meaningful for him. And then he leaves, and the nurse is like, "Oh, you were in the wrong room. Yeah, that guy died like 2 days ago. The guy that you wanted to see is already dead." And it was just some random stranger.
Which I want to ask you guys: did you see that coming? Because I totally did.
You did?
Yeah, I just. Had
I
the
did
sense
as well.
that it was,
Yeah.
like, not. Yeah,
I mean, I didn't exactly, but I probably should have, because that exact same thing basically happens earlier in the novel in one of Sebastian's books, where the guy goes to where he understands his mother died, and he goes to this town, and he has this really meaningful experience, and he thinks he's at the house that his mother grew up in, and then he gets back home, and he finds out it's a totally different town just with the same name in a different country.
Right. Which
so
is
it's the same sort of
prove...
thing, which again, right, the parallels between Sebastian's writings and what actually happens to V in the text.
But to also prove further that just like you don't need reality in order to sense and sort of experience these kind of reliefs and just like, you know what I mean? Like
meaning is generated in ways that are not necessarily right.
Yeah, like attached to anything that you would regard as like the truth or what you would even want. It's just like hearing the placebo of someone breathing that is you've been told is your brother or whatever.
And V ultimately comes to that. He ultimately comes to that conclusion, right? Which I think is interesting because, again, I'm sort of interested a little bit in the meta question here about Nabokov's own views of like literary criticism and these sorts of questions. But V ultimately comes to that same conclusion, that his experience of being in that room, hearing that person breathe, and in their last sort of moments of life, is actually not diminished in its meaning for him by the fact that he later found out that it wasn't actually who he thought it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it actually reminds me, I've been watching a lot of Star Trek, it reminds me of anyone that goes onto the holodeck and has a cathartic experience with a particular holographic person.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
And what if you find meeting as an actual person in the holodeck, does that devalue those feelings you had in that moment? I'm not sure about the answer to that question. But I also wanted to say that Gabe, you said that it relates to that person's mom who died earlier in the book, but it also relates to what Matt you said about the femme fatale. I forget his name, Helena.
Well, so there's that's who Madame Lesurf says it was, but then V thinks it was her. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that kind of relates to that situation too. Is that like, I don't know, he gets meaning out of that situation,
right?
Even though we're not even sure if that was really the right person, but he came to the conclusion himself, and it was like, you know, a cathartic experience for him in that moment, even though he wasn't sure if it was her or not.
And I just think that's I think there's a number of like moments where that becomes sort of a theme. Like meaning is made. It's not pre-existent. It's not found. Like it is constructed out of our engagements with situations.
And it's yes. It's made by someone like Sebastian, and then it's made in these very complicated ways when V is writing about Sebastian, because like those satisfactions from meaning making that are so individual affect V's willingness and ability to write about someone else. Like and that's history. That's how history is written, like you were saying, Paul. Like, you know, right. It's artificial in a sense, and subjective. So therefore, like, always a grain of salt is necessary when taking someone's account of something, because at least one grain is necessary.
Even your own personal account you need to take with a grain of salt too, which I think is an interesting thing.
Dude, you're a postmodernist, bro.
Maybe I am. I just realized it this episode. But
I don't think most people can help to be that, at least narratively or narrative makingly.
To be a postmodernist?
Who can avoid such a dilemma, you know, or like
religious people, probably.
No. I think I don't know. This is like so beyond the bounds of what we're talking about, but yeah, I don't think so.
Well, it did remind me when thinking about. So there's been a bit of a debate in academic sort of philosophy recently about, and there's a great article that I highly recommend. You can maybe we'll put it in the description for the episode, but you can find it. It's at Aeon Magazine, AEON, and the title of the article by Galen Strawson, who's a well-known, British philosopher. It's called "I Am Not a Story," and it's about this idea that we subjectively view our lives as kind of like narratives. You know what I mean? That there's like story beats, and we sort of have like,
my life a story, my life a movie.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And he's arguing and has been arguing that this is not only false but also like bad. Like we should stop thinking this way if we do, right? Like that looking at
Galen
your
or
life,
Glenn Matheson?
Galen Strawson.
Fuck, sorry.
And he suggests that this view of our lot that the way we live is structured as a narrative is not only false in terms of it's not consonant with our sort of like subjective experiences, generally speaking, and we people who think that way are kind of trying to fit square pegs into round holes, but it's also like can lead to some morally bad outcomes, like some kind of problematic outcomes. So anyway, I recommend that article, and I think it actually was from a collection of articles I forgot the title of. But it strikes me that that's also something that Nabokov is sort of joining in critiquing here, right? Like this idea that we can just kind of piece together this and that fact about our life in a narrative sequence, and then therefore that's our life. I think Nabokov is rejecting that view pretty strongly here.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And I think it gets back to what you said earlier, Paul, where, we're not missing a ton factually about Sebastian Knight's life. And yet, his life, and by extension anyone's life, is something that is more than the sum of those parts, right? We can state all of the factual things about someone's life, but then and yet there's still something else that is not captured by only doing that.
Totally.
And I think
I don't think. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
no, I was just gonna say that the image, like, finally, like Nabokov again as like a chess guy, like he's using knight to mean the chess piece,
Yep.
and therefore like the sort of like materialist, logical kind of assessment of someone's life as an Excel spreadsheet of facts leading linearly to a conclusion or an assessment is always going to be subverted sort of perpendicularly in the way that a knight piece in chess moves, where it goes straight but then it just moves to the left or the right. And like that move set is supposed to be significant to how evasive and impossible it is to get someone to move along a like set of rails, basically, narratively.
Right.
That's my only point.
Or
there.
like the space chess set in TNG, where it's
the
like 5
Romulan
different
chess.
boards.
Yeah, that's where the
Yeah.
term 4D chess fucking comes from, dude. The fucking shit that people claim that every politician is operating on, when they're actually just like dumbasses. Same thing Trump
Is it
got
really?
Yeah, Trump is like, "Oh, they're playing
from
fucking
Star Trek?
4D. They're playing fucking 4D chess." Trump. And it's just Romulan chess. And it's just Star Trek, and it's just J.J. Abrams.
J.J.
No,
Abrams,
don't say that.
J.J. Abrams, friend of the pod. Come on, buddy.
Yeah, come on and tell me why your movies have been so bad, you stupid idiot. Tell me why Damon Lindelof is actually the powerhouse. and
Let's
stuff.
go. Okay, that's
Yeah.
spicy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to go there. I'm sorry.
You're not wrong though.
Yeah,
So,
show me the error.
do you
I was
guys
gonna say
do you guys
something,
think
but I
that
forgot.
do you guys think that V and Sebastian Knight could be the same person?
Yeah.
So let's
I
let's just talk about that final paragraph, because there's a lot there, right? Or that final kind of section.
Okay, I'll go first.
I think someone should just read this first. The last. It doesn't have to be me. I know I always tend to read the long shit.
Starting with thus, Paul, why don't you do it?
I was gonna say starting with
No.
so I did not.
I don't want to.
Oh, you want the full 204.
Matt, do it.
Okay, I'll do it. So I did not see Sebastian after all, or at least I did not see him alive. But those few minutes I spent listening to what I thought was his breathing changed my life as completely as it would have been changed had Sebastian spoken to me before dying. Whatever his secret was, I have learnt one secret too, and namely, that the soul is but a manner of being, not a constant state, that any soul may be yours if you find and follow its undulations. The hereafter may be the full ability of consciously living in any chosen soul, in any number of souls, all of them unconscious of their interchangeable burden. Thus I am Sebastian Knight. And this is V talking. I feel as if I were impersonating him on a lighted stage, with the people he knew coming and going, the dim figures of the few friends he had, the scholar and the poet and the painter, smoothly and noiselessly paying their graceful tribute. And here is Goodman, the flat-footed buffoon, with his dicky hanging out of his waistcoat, and there, a pale radiance of Claire's inclined head, as she is led away weeping by a friendly maiden. They moved around Sebastian, round me who am acting Sebastian, and the old conjurer waits in the wings with his hidden rabbit, and Nina sits on a table in the brightest corner of the stage with a wine glass of fuchsigned, don't know how to say that, water.
Never
under a
heard that
painted
word
palm.
before.
I think fuchsia is the color that Nabokov attributes to time as an element, which is in the preface. Under a painted palm. And then the masquerade draws to a close. The bald little prompter shuts his book as the light fades gently. The end. They all go back to their everyday life, and Clara goes back to her grave. But the hero remains, for, try as I may, I cannot get out of my part. Sebastian's mask clings to my face. The likeness will not be washed off. I am Sebastian, or Sebastian is I, or perhaps we both are someone whom neither of us knows.
Goddamn.
Bladow! And this movie, The Mask.
And this
really
movie, this movie is The Mask, starring Jim
is
Carrey.
The Mask.
Somebody stop me.
and the
I have
Son
to
of
admit-
Mask, starring Jamie Kennedy.
I have to admit, for whatever reason, I thought of The Mask too when he said that. I don't know
Well,
why.
just the word mask, probably.
V is just
Yeah.
Jim Carrey, and the end of the book is just him looking at the reader and just being, I smoke it.
It's smoky.
Somebody stop me.
And it's like, who are you? Are you the cartoon character green guy? Or are you Jim Carrey?
Ugh.
I don't
And it's
know.
like
I kind of
IDK.
read this. I read it as kind of like a Blade Runner is Decker replicant situation, but I am leaning towards him being. I feel like he just gives away his cards in a good way. Like this is a fictionalized biography, and I am both of these people.
I'll tell you what.
That's
That's pretty astute of you, Paul. Blade Runner 2049 was written by the same screenwriters as Blade Runner, the first Blade Runner, and
know.
they are huge Nabokov fans who reference Pale Fire and Blade Runner 2049 all over the fucking place.
they do, huh?
Yes, it's not it's not even a joke. Like
That's interesting.
those
read
do
that
that
just so I
the
can get a
main.
better
I
viewing
forget
of
I forget the
2049.
name of the guy. Yeah, but like no joke, Blade Runner, the first one, is probably referencing Nabokov a ton.
That's really interesting.
Well, the opening scene of 2049 was originally written for the original Blade Runner by the original.
And Philip K.
screenwriters.
Dick, as another writer who we will be addressing at some point in the
Which
future,
soon,
is
couple
another.
weeks.
Yes,
Ubik.
another. Well, we were trying to be subtle, but it's Ubik.
We're not. Though.
we
We're
I posted
We're
it on
planting
social
out.
media today.
yeah. It's posted.
Read along. Read along.
We want people to join into discussion now.
When you
yes, we
when,
do want you to join us.
When you hear your family,
You're getting it out there. When you hear your family.
At some point, weren't they contemporary? Not contemporaries in the like classic sense, but they overlapped in the times that they were alive and working, right? Philip K.
Dick
Dick
and Nabokov?
and Nabokov, right? 60s.
Yeah,
Probably.
I think he started writing.
I
in
don't
the
know
late
when Nabokov
50s.
died. I actually don't know that date, but
You know, knob the cough of my head. I don't know either.
77. 1977.
Okay.
So yeah,
perfect.
that was.
Oh my
That's
god.
pretty good.
I had the date, but I lobster, right?
Oh
Just
my
another
God,
thing.
I can't. I love that we just like read the most sort of important passage in the book and just whoop.
Yeah, well.
Okay, no, we
No,
can.
I'm
we can-
joking. I'm
sorry.
joking. I'm not trying. I'm not finger wagging. But I do want.
We
I do
can
think
circle
it's
back.
interesting. What do we make of this? Are they the same fucking person? Are they fucking? Is this like a double, triple meta thing where this is actually Sebastian Knight's fictionalized biography that he claimed was going to be his
That-
last book? Like, what is this?
That's my take. That would be what I would say is probably what's happening. Is that this is Sebastian Knight's last book?
So you think V
That we're
is
reading.
a creation of Sebastian Knight?
Not real.
Yeah. But of course, then they're
Yeah.
both, as the final line suggests, they're both creations of someone else, which is Nabokov. In reality.
Exactly
yeah,
right.
In reality, I think I feel like I read the ending as a doubling down of all the ideas that he set forth in the novel. It's like
Yeah.
I'm gonna, totally up the ante in the last page, and whatever I was talking about is gonna be exasperated right at the end. And
Right, and still provide mostly question marks, all of which are valid.
Right.
Were you to ask yourself which one you actually believed was the truth?
Well, I think
And-
that's another like major theme in the book is you said doubling down, Paul, but like doubling in general is like a big theme in the text. Like Sebastian and V are kind of like doubles or mirror images of one another. V's experiences searching for the quote unquote truth of Sebastian's life are doubled by many of the things that Sebastian wrote about in his novels. And there's characters that reappear in both. And so, like, I think that, like, the whole book, and again, I think this portrait, for me, that was actually, like, kind of a big deal. The Roy Carswell portrait that we mentioned earlier of Sebastian, where it's this double of Sebastian. It's him looking as a narcissist into the pool, but it's distorted in these small ways. It's doubled, but it's altered, right? And I think that is kind of the vibe of the book.
Also, the thing that's against my interpretation at the moment, that like this represents, this book itself is Sebastian's last, is that book textually is, you know, which again is grains of salt and doubt, you know, cast upon it, is unfinished. Sebastian himself has supposed to have died before he was able to finish it. So,
but even that is we only get that information from within this book itself, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's
That's
totally
where I don't believe that.
Well, if we're thinking of it as like a book that actually could have been written by a person named Sebastian Knight, he could have. I still see that aspect of the story being like a cheeky thing the author could have done. Like, oh, I'm writing about the last book. This is the last book I wrote, but I still have one coming out after. You know.
Right.
Then I'm not actually dead.
I'm trying to, like, I what I was trying to do that I failed was, like, get some sense based off of literally, like, titles of the fake books.
Yeah, I think there's
like the
probably
trajectory of the thought of Sebastian Knight. You know, like we have the fake detective novel, and then we have Albinos in Black.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
And then the Funny Mountain. I thought of the Magic Mountain. I don't know if that's correct. I don't really know what it is. I think it's a short story collection.
Success, right?
Or so sorry, Lost Property. Then it's Success, and then I believe it's Albinos in Black.
Yeah.
The Funny Mountain, the Doubtful Asphodel.
That's his last one, right?
Yes, which is a flower associated with death and Persephone and things like this.
Right.
And maybe there was a title to the fictitious autobiography, but I didn't catch it.
I don't think so.
I don't think it was there. 5 books, I believe, in total.
Yep.
Not sure if that has any significance, but I think it's just, again, it with Nabokov and one of the reasons I wanted to read him and like reading him is that stuff could and tends to, and it's just fun. It's just fun to try and guess if that's true.
Well, and he played that shit up, like, and you know, I read you know a couple articles about this book, even the name Sebastian Knight, and this is probably like academics overthinking this, right? But the name Sebastian Knight is an anagram of a knight is absent with an extra A, right? So it's not a real anagram, but of course, right? Academics being academics, they say that extra A can, you know, symbolizes the excess, the things that the language can't actually capture, right? It's the overflow. It's the things that are missed in the recollections of memory. It's the things that are, you know, it's that abyss between language and what we actually wish we could express. Now, that's some academic shit, but it struck me based on what you were just saying, Matt.
And Nabokov is definitely one of those types of writers.
Yes.
You know, like I watched those Yale lectures on Lolita, which are very good. But like there's like I said before, I think there's plenty of anagrams and shit. Like Vivian Darkbloom is a anagram of Vladimir Nabokov. That's way more straightforward than his name, but with
Wait a minute. The A, it's not even an extra A. A night is A-B-S-E. No, there's no extra A. A night is absent. It's there.
Then that now it sounds more plausible.
These dum-dums, these academic dum-dums.
How could they get that wrong?
Because for some reason, they use the phrase "knight is absent," as in like knight himself as a person. But if you use the other A as the first word, a knight is absent, then it's a perfect anagram.
Well, then that feels completely within the realm of possibility.
Let's fucking go. I'm smarter than these people. Dude, you're not smarter than me.
I came up with another anagram right now for it, and it's hat skin beast. So that could be it too.
Wait, where's the G?
There's no G.
I
I didn't have the G. Okay, I got to put the G in there somewhere. Shit. That's
Hang.
not gonna work.
No, fuck. Sking.
If there's any anagram-based podcasts out there that want to
Oh no, how about Hat Beast Kings.
That sounds
Hat Beast Kings.
Yeah. Does that work?
Yeah.
Hat
I don't know.
Beast Kings. Yeah, I think that works.
That kind of rocks.
How about King's Hat Beast? Yeah, we can figure it out.
What I also like, I think finally, and apropos of not much of what we're talking about now, but just like, I thought it was interesting because I know that it's true of Nabokov's own thought, and like, therefore, and it's Sebastian's thought is like, cliche and genre convention are anathema, and the artistic and aesthetic equivalent of immorality, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to me why some of these what would be regarded as postmodern issues, right, referential reverberations through time,
fractured identities and
fractured identity, the meaning, how you're beholden to who,
language,
and whether language has a somewhat more direct, like, cause, like that might have less to do with what the normal postmodern hang-ups are, which is just that it's boring, and and that like it's lazy, and laziness is immoral, and aesthetic novelty is the only way to prove that you are not just some fucking hack, and that you are not resting on your laurels and being fat about your ability to write.
kind of like Sebastian Knight did at points in his life.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like Sebastian Knight adopts those same views, which were genuine views, I think, held by Nabokov. Again, brought up most importantly in Lolita, I think, as methods of couching great evil, because I think the difference between aesthetic immorality and actual immorality are complicated and pretty connected for him.
Sure.
Even if you don't agree with that being having an actual substantive connection, or it's like a kind of artist morality question as well, which is something we've never stopped arguing about. Basically.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Which Lolita is something that is still brought up.
Yep.
When we have that kind of discussion, like, because you can Lolita and then pedophilia, and then you just go straight to like what, Polanski or Woody Allen or any of this kind of stuff. It's still weirdly tied
Jeffrey
up.
Epstein.
All the
Not
great
an artist.
aesthetic works he
Not
produced.
an artist. I mean, if you think of a capitalist success as an artist,
True.
maybe he is.
True.
Maybe artisan.
I also think it's worth. It just needs to be said
Entrepreneur.
on this show that this book was written basically entirely on the toilet.
Yes.
Nabokov.
Yeah.
While his bidet was up his ass.
Yeah. He
Yes.
was getting his little butthole cleaned while he was writing this book the whole time.
Which is
Because he
hilarious.
didn't want to wake his daughter up.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
what
it's
we
good.
that's
It's
what
a
we that's
weird-
what we
it's
call
one
him
of the
around
craziest-
here. Clean butt Vladimir.
A clean butthole is a clean mind.
So true. Any other thoughts, boys, before we go to the wrap up segments?
No, not really.
Any other passages you want to read? Anything like that?
No, I want to reiterate, like, I actually didn't look up how many published works he's had before this, or if there
How
was
many
any.
published
It was
works
like
total?
3.
Yeah,
It was, yeah, I think it was. Let's see.
like I read. I forgot to mention that I read Pinin, but like, yeah, I know he had written some books before this one, and this was the first quote unquote English novel he wrote. But like,
He had written a number of things before this in Russian.
okay.
But nothing major. Yeah.
Oh, I did. I underlined a bunch of passages, but I don't want to read them. But he did have the term ghoulish fun on page 29, which I thought was hilarious. I'm going to use that one. Some ghoulish
Yes.
fun.
He
That's
described he described a clock as having, and this is from Beauty and the Beast, basically, a waxed mustache because it was like 2:15 or something. I forget what it was, but it was like basically the two hands were straight across the face of the clock, and he was like, the clock had a wax mustache, and I was like, hell yeah.
That's awesome. I did want to read this little segment too, where V visits Sebastian after I think 4 years since they've seen each other. It's on the bottom of 107. After he had asked me a few questions about himself, he's talking about Sebastian. We both found it strained to carry on the conversation. I asked him what had become of the nice girl with whom I had seen him the last time. What girl? He asked. Oh, Claire. Yes, she's all right. We're sort of married. And that's that's him talking about Claire, who ended up being his wife. It was a great characterization of just how he just didn't give a shit. And he was just
Right,
a
and how-
douche.
Yes, exactly. How he his interpersonal relationships were really bad because he was completely engrossed in his own mental world. And,
But then there's a passage where V reads a love letter that he wrote to Claire that was really beautiful about the passage of time and how you just fall out of love even though you're not out of love with somebody, but you just end up moving on. But then he, right after that passage ends, he kind of devalues it, and he's just that's what he could have written or something. It was a very meta moment for me too. I underlined it, and then he was like, "Yeah, that was some bullshit letter, but it's not actually
Yes.
what he wrote or something." And I was like, "Oh, I underlined that, thinking it was awesome," and now he's just telling me that it was bullshit, and it felt confusing and good.
there was
Yeah,
another
overcooked.
moment like that too. Where it's just Nabokov creating confusion playfully. I think where he's with Helene, right, at her shitty French rural.
Well, he's with Le Cerf, right? Helene is Le Cerf's friend, who she says, right? Am I getting that right?
It's not real, but that's not what we're pointing out is that that's not necessarily
Got
true,
it. Okay.
right? Le Cerf is probably Helene. There were false names written on the hotel ledger,
Right.
and also there's no smoking gun fucking like final proof of this, but like
Well, and LeSurf goes out of her way to
V's
not.
like yes.
I was just gonna say,
stare down.
I was just gonna say, LeSurf goes out of her way to not let V actually interact with her friend, who she claims is the woman that he's after.
Right.
Yeah, well, she set up this whole scenario because she obviously wasn't the woman. So, yeah, right? That's how I read it. She was just like inviting her friend over, knowing that she wasn't the person, that it was her, you know.
Yes, probably.
Probably.
And V leaves for that reason. He's like, okay, you're clearly the mercurial, mischievous woman who seems the most likely to have made my half brother so depressed that he had a heart attack. like you know what I mean? Like, I guess. So I'm gonna leave before I get embroiled in more of this shit. But
It's
yeah,
just
I
more
don't
proof
have
that
any more passages.
The witness is an unreliable narrator.
I just have one more passage that I think is kind of, you know, for me, emblematic of a lot of this, sort of some of these themes. And this is when he's on his way to LeSurf's kind of like country home, where he's going to meet who he thinks is Helene, who she's told him who Helene is.
Right.
This is on 164. I started at 9 in the morning so as to reach Lescaut around noon as arranged. I was already boarding the train when I realized with a shock that on my way I should pass Saint-Damier, where Sebastian had died and was buried. Here I had traveled one unforgettable night, but now I failed to recognize anything. When the train stopped for a minute at the little Saint-Damier platform, its inscription alone told me that I had been there. The place looked so simple and staid and definite compared to the distorted dream impression which lingered in my memory. Or was it distorted now? And I just think that that's it. Like, that is, in so many ways, such a distillation of so much of the book. Like, that this experience that I'm having is distorted versus my memory of it. Or was my memory distorted in the first place, or vice versa, right? Like, I don't know. That moment really struck me.
One final
memory. What is it?
Memory, what is it?
Well, one final thing I want to point out about this is like the sort of final attempt, right, at pinpointing some factual person within Sebastian's biography. I think it's interesting that it's in Lescaut, right, which is like, and I don't know if I think I'm right? Isn't that where the OG cave paintings were found? Around the time of when Nabokov would have been writing?
I'm genuinely not sure.
Like the basically like the origin of the early pictorial representations of like the prior evolutionary species
you're right.
to Homo
You're
sapien.
right, man.
Yes.
Good job. A+.
Which
That's
is like
A+.
essentially
That's A+ work, dude.
I get extra credit.
It's spelled differently
cheers.
in this text as it is in real life.
Well, that means I could be wrong. But
E versus A. Lescaut or Lasco. I don't know.
E
It might not
MC
matter.
Squared.
I guess my only point was just like you get the first quote I would guess quote unquote historical accounting by humans interpreted by later humans of like their behaviors and their life and things like that. Again, that might be what Gabe described as a very academic response to like this shit, but I don't know.
I don't think it's overly academic at all. I mean, I think, you know, again, barring us just being wrong that there's a town Lescaut with an E and one with an A. Okay, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But assuming they're the same place, I don't think it's a weird connection at all, because that's like one of the first recorded, you know, instances of humans attempting to express themselves via symbols. And that's what this fucking book is about. Like, and the ways that fails.
Yes.
So I actually think that's a really fucking important connection for sure.
That's the only one. The last thing I wanted to sort of Hail Mary I wanted to throw.
I don't
at
think
this
it's a
whole
Hail
situation.
Mary. I love it.
Thank you, Gabriel.
So academic of you.
Thanks, man.
I think the last Hail Mary I want to throw is that anagram you said of Sebastian Knight. Gabe, what was it again?
A knight is absent.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of Tom Riddle in I Am Voldemort and
All right. Let me take a piss.
So while Matt takes a piss, I'll introduce the segment. This is one of the fan favorite segments on the show, according to nobody.
According to nobody.
Because nobody's ever listened this far into the show. Where
It's definitely a host favorite segment.
It's definitely a host favorite segment. Where we call it, we literally just read another book, which is where we get to indulge our teenage dumb brains and put all of the characters, not all, but the important characters from the book that we just read into respective Harry Potter houses. And
When you say it that earnestly, it just makes me laugh. It's just so stupid.
I'm
It's
very
having this, like-
no, I'm offended. It's not stupid. This is important. This is important work we're doing.
It is important, and I agree. It's just
This is gonna go down in history when Harry Potter houses take the place of astrology and tarot. Then they're gonna refer to this podcast and be like, their arguments about Harry Potter houses are the best. They're actually very smart.
It will be actually in the history books. These guys smart.
They more deeply analyzed Harry Potter houses than even
JK.
JK herself, who is canceled, by the way.
She doesn't even have a right to do it anymore. She's
Right.
canceled.
You've given up control of these concepts.
Yeah. Totally.
All right, Matt, the segment is introduced. And
Okay.
So who do we think is worth? So obviously Sebastian and V, right? Assuming they're real people.
Yeah.
Maybe Claire.
I would say probably Sebastian and V are basically the only people worth exploring that idea.
You don't think Claire?
No.
No.
Wow.
I'm okay with just doing the two.
All right.
I feel bad for Claire. I think Claire got the short end of the stick. Her life seems disproportionately tragic to what she was and attempted to do, and
As the greatest American president would say, sad.
sad, dude. She
thought
seemed
you were
fucking
gonna say
sick,
Abraham
but
Lincoln.
I don't know enough about her, man.
All right. That
I
scene,
think-
I'm not gonna say I teared up, but that scene where V kind of like pulls back from like accosting her because she just is so pathetic and like blind and pregnant. She's pregnant in that scene, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, so depressing.
I know, man.
Anyway, all right, let's do it then. V.
The fact that V and Sebastian are potentially the same person is apropos.
It adds an interesting dynamic. So does that mean we have to have the same answer for both?
No, but maybe.
I think I might have different. I'm gonna say Sebastian is a Ravenclaw.
Interesting.
A dirty, saucy, slimy Ravenclaw.
That's interesting. Okay, why
Yeah.
Ravenclaw?
Well, he's just all about his freaking art, dude. He's a freaking artist living to make art and literature, and that's all he cares about. And he's not overly concerned. He's not like a Slytherin. He's not overly concerned with like image or anything. He's just.
But
like,
he is
wants to
overly
make
concerned with
freaking work.
himself.
So.
Yeah, but there's
Doesn't mean
there's
he
a
has to be a
lack of
Slytherin.
there's a lack of
Like he's
Yeah,
clearly a narcissist, right?
Yes, he gets a painting where that's the idea, but I don't know if that's actually where he lands cleanly.
It's a necessary but not sufficient condition for Slytherin.
Yeah.
Is it a justified true belief game? I'm gonna agree with Paul. I think he's Ravenclaw, and I think that V is Hufflepuff.
I'm gonna tentatively put a stake in the ground and say that Sebastian is Slytherin. I'm not 100. It's a weak Slytherin for me. It's a weak claim. I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm gonna, just to be controversial.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, well, he's not.
I think he proved that based on again, it's all complicated by the account that like there's maybe no difference between these people, and
Right.
it's like it's postmodern in that way where everyone can be expanded or contracted into each other. But like it seemed like Sebastian was like evolving out of the solipsism that he was developing for the first 30
Yes.
years of his life
Yeah.
into some like broader understanding of like humanity and the people around him in a way that would have justified me. Like, he's not just a fucking asshole who's like, I'm a genius, I'm gonna be more.
So maybe if we're going down the astrology route, maybe I would call Sebastian a waning Slytherin.
Let's smash two sort of like questionable ways to measure people together.
He's a waning.
And I agree with you.
He's a waning Slytherin.
He's a waning Slytherin, sure, but therefore I'm going to call him a Ravenclaw.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Waxing
I'm
Ravenclaw.
pretty. You think he's on the cusp?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's on the
Yes.
cusp.
We could use.
yeah. He's on the way.
All right. So what about V?
I think I agree with Matt. I think he's a Hufflepuff. I think he has a lot of gall. Like he's really interested in like exploring and writing this book about Sebastian.
But he's inept in all the ways that a Hufflepuff would be in the pursuit of that.
I agree.
Yeah, like he wants to do well by his cousin, Jesus Christ, his half brother, who he's like obsessed with. And
oh my god, that was a huge mistake.
Wow, what a boner!
We got to run it back. We got to re-record this whole episode.
I pulled a boner. Shit.
Yeah, I kind of imagine V as being like a puffer fish, like floating around.
Hufflepuffer.
Hufflepuffer.
Hufflepuff fish. Just kind of like this guy who's just kind of, I don't know, kind of a dumb.
He is kind of a dum-dum. But it's also
Yeah.
okay, I will just say this, though. One of the other small things that I found really funny is that V so often is like, Sebastian Knight is the best writer. I'm such a fucking idiot loser compared to him. And it comes right before a section where it's supposed to be V's writing that is beautiful and really good and like very like so I think it's really sort of, again, this sort of like performative contradiction in V's description of his own experience and his understanding of Sebastian's life, where he's just like, oh my god, Sebastian was this fucking genius and I'm like this dumb idiot. And then he writes 3 pages of just beautiful, like incredible prose.
Yes.
Well, I think that, but it's not him, right? If we all think that V doesn't exist, then it was Sebastian writing it.
That's right. That's
Yes.
It's a big
Because
it's a big thing.
Yep.
Because that's like the, you know, again, to bring it to a book I've never fucking read, and I'm sorry. But like one of the things about Lolita was everyone's like, why is Humbert so good at saying how he feels and expressing beautifully his situation and his ideas?
And it's because it's the
like, 'cause
writer
it's
that wrote
not-
the words.
Yeah, it's just like not him.
Humbert is
It's not him.
Humbert is the OG gooner.
Is that his name in the book? Humbert?
Yeah.
Good lord.
Humpy.
Humbert, dude.
It's more like Cumbert.
Yes, 100%. Coombert.
Gooner. All right.
So my final votes are R Claw, H Buff.
Yeah, my final vote
Same.
is waxing Slytherin and Hufflepuff and full Hufflepuff.
Got you. All right, great. I love that for us.
All right, boys. What are we giving this book out of 5? So Matt has to go
was
last. Yeah,
because it was his pick.
I can go first. To me, this is a bullseye 4.00. I thought it was obviously like at points deeply beautiful, like writing wise. I thought it was complex, brought up a lot of interesting issues. I thought, again, it's probably unfair, but I was just because it's not right. Like, we make jokes, every book is a sequel to every other book, but at the same time, you can't necessarily compare. But I couldn't help comparing this to the Museum of Unconditional Surrender in terms of questions of memory, identity, history, like personal sort of place and connection. And I like that book significantly more than I like this one, which is reflected in my score.
Still a high score. 4.0 is good.
Yeah, no, it's very good. It's a very good.
Very good.
I thought it
Very
was
good.
excellent. I enjoyed it deeply.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to give it a 3.80. It was a good book. I liked it. I
Still
thought the
tight.
writing is beautiful. It just like makes me want to read more. I'm gonna read Lolita next because I feel like it's about time.
Let's do it on the pod.
Well, maybe we should. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like the postmodern ideas that were brought up. I liked the characterizations, even though they were very, meta characterizations, and you don't know what to believe. But yeah, I think Nabokov is just obviously, everyone always says it, but he's a brilliant writer. He's also really funny. Like, there were some funny moments.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cheeky moments. And overall, there wasn't like this overall darkness to it either that I kind of expected out of Nabokov. That I don't know why I did. I just thought, when I think of Lolita, I think of just like this dark book, but maybe that.
Well, the
book is
themes are
written in a
dark.
similar style.
They're
Yes.
just not represented that way.
They're written kind of wholesomely. Like, this book felt wholesome to me. Like, I don't know. It made me feel good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm 3.85.
I love that. I love that.
I mean, once again, me and Gabe find ourselves at it's the same. 4. It's a 4.
Oh my God,
It's
I'm
across the board
outsider.
4, man.
I'm the outsider.
Barely.
We're pretty fucking close. We're all pretty fucking close.
This is a pretty unanimous decision here. Just like, even for Nabokov, right? I'm just aware of this being an early one for him. I see all of the shit like that moves into his later works, which I think he's mostly known for the works post World War II.
Yeah.
I would say.
Hellfire, Lolita.
Yes. Ada.
Yep.
And yeah, I really want to reread all that stuff, and I want to revisit all his earlier stuff. But yeah, so yeah, a solid, just a 4. I like this book very much.
Yep.
Sweet.
Sick.
God. Damn. I love when we're all, I love when we're all on the same page, but I also love when we're not. So.
Me too.
So who's to say what the truth is?
Postmodernism.
Yeah, it's postmodern.
Yeah, I definitely, I will be rereading or effectively reading for the first time Lolita and Pale Fire and some of his other stuff.
That Yale lecture was good. I almost feel like it's bad that I listened to it before reading, but
I did watch the second. I only watched the second one, but yeah, it was very illuminating, I thought.
I mean, I once again, like, both as a sort of cringe metric and not, like, it feels like all these issues have just sort of increased their relevance and also
Definitely.
exponentially increased their the topic at hand in even a book like this has only become more complicated and over time.
Yes,
Basically, it's
yes.
just like all these concerns are now just this plus, and that's basically the situation we find ourselves in. So there's no harm. It's very helpful to see the originary sort of concerns and go
And it's
like,
so,
and now we're here.
Again, I think it's so interesting, thinking about Nabokov's own attitudes towards all this shit and how much he would have hated it and how much he hated even the level of literary criticism at his time, like during his lifetime, which was not like it would, Derrida wasn't fucking writing yet, like none of that, it was. I think that is so interesting that he seems to me to be clearly participating in those sort of discourses while also denouncing them personally, which again,
And eventually he would be.
exactly, yeah. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
All right, everybody. If you're here still, you might like our Patreon. You might like the show enough to give us some money. Go check it out. Patreon.com/Spinecrackers. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
We are the Panopticon.
Legion. Yeah. And we are in love with you.
That's right.
love you.
I love you so much.